have an opening prayer from Levi Owen.
Our Father in heaven, we are indeed grateful to gather this night to discuss the needs of our district and the students for whom we have been given stewardship. We pray that thou enlighten us and guide us to make those choices and decisions that will be best for the students we serve and the accountability we have to our patrons and others. We pray for the leaders of this nation and nations throughout the world that we can come together and become more unified in purpose and direction as we pray in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Levi. All right, we're going to call our meeting to order, and we're going to have a roll call. Chad Dance.
Here.
Greg Calder.
Here.
Paul Jenkins.
Here.
Scott Lynch is excused, and I, Amy Landers, am here. We'd like to welcome everybody out to our meeting tonight, and we're grateful that you guys are here. And I also noticed that we have Tom Hunsaker here, and we have not seen you for a while, and it's pretty awesome to have you back. And anyway, my condolences to you and your family as well. So it's good to see you. If anybody is wanting to appear before the board tonight during our public input portion of the board, there's a clipboard in the back. I believe that if you would like to sign in on that, if you are not already on our agenda and would like to speak with the board, and if it involves any kind of a complaint about personnel or student, that is not to be talked about in our open meeting. That has to be done differently through a grievance policy. So, all right, we need a motion to go ahead and approve our agenda.
I so move.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Calder, seconded by Mr. Dance. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. We have some motions from our executive session, and I think we are going to lump these into one motion rather than three separate. So, involving the three different employees that are on your agenda. So, if we have a motion.
I move that we approve the leave without pay requests for employee N 2021, O 2021, and P 2021.
Okay.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Calder, seconded by Mr. Jenkins. Is there, well, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. All right. Some fun things tonight. Heath Jackson is going to be presenting the recommendation for the tiebreaker principle.
Thank you, Chairman Landers and members of the board. I'm excited tonight to make a recommendation for Tiebreaker Elementary with Mr. Patterson moving to Sand Creek Middle School as the principal there. That left that opening, that Tiebreaker. Mr. Patterson's been at Tiebreaker for 13 years, and so it's been a bit of a rough month for him to come to terms with that change, but we appreciate his service to Tiebreaker and excited for the new leadership that will be there. The process of interviewing and selecting candidates for our principal jobs has become a little bit daunting this spring, as we've had a high number of candidates for all of our open positions and very skilled and qualified candidates. We went through that process and identified 8 candidates that we brought in last week for interviews, formed a committee including teachers, secretary, staff at Tiebreaker, as well as myself and Mr. Pym. And we went through that interview process and identified candidates that we recommended to be interviewed for a second interview. And last night we met with those 2 candidates. And tonight we would like to present Brianna Tuckett as the next principal at Tiebreaker Elementary. A little bit of information about Brianna. She is currently working at Hillview Elementary. She's been there for 2 years now. She came to us from West Jefferson out in Territon, where she taught elementary school for 11 years, and prior to that she had a couple of years of experience in the Jefferson School District. So she comes as a very experienced educator, very well prepared for this next opportunity, and we appreciate her willingness to take this opportunity and role as the next principal at Tiebreaker Elementary. So tonight we'd ask the board to approve our recommendation of Brianna Tuckett as Tiebreaker Elementary principal.
So we're going to go ahead and make that motion, and then we would like to hear from you. So we would need a motion to go ahead and approve the recommendation.
I so move.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Dance, seconded by Mr. Calder. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Unanimous vote. If you would like to please come up, we would like to hear from you.
Thank you so much. First of all, I just really want to say how honored I am to be offered this opportunity to be the principal at Tiebreaker. I feel very grateful and very humbled to be in this position. I am so excited to begin working at Tiebreaker and to get to know the community and the students and the parents and start forging those relationships so that we can work together to continue making Tiebreaker a great place for kids to be. I know that Mr. Patterson has worked really hard at Tiebreaker and established some amazing things there. So I'm also excited to continue that legacy forward and to get to know the staff and the faculty and really start to build that team so that we can just continue into the future and do great things. So thank you again so very much for this opportunity. I am very grateful and very excited.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
We're excited.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. All right. Is there anybody on the board that would like to remove any of the items from the consent calendar and put them on our regular agenda? Okay. We would need a motion to go ahead and approve the consent calendar.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mr. Jenkins, seconded by Mr. Dance. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
Chairman Landers,
Yes.
with the approval of the consent calendar, if you're okay, tonight we have two other administrators' positions were on the consent calendar, and they're both here. And if you're okay, I'd just like to introduce them to the board and have the principals that submitted their names for the board to hire to come
I
up
would
as
love
well.
that actually, because I saw one of them sitting out
Yep,
here, and
they're
I had
both here,
the
so-
thought. I had that thought, but
Excellent.
it wasn't on here.
Yeah,
so I was
thanks,
like, oh.
Amy. I
So,
appreciate
yeah, I
that
would actually
opportunity.
love that.
So we'll start with Dave England, and if Levi, if you wouldn't mind bringing Dave up. Dave has been hired to fill Ben Parker's position as an assistant principal at Bonneville High School. I've known Dave for at least a decade, I think. I was going back and trying to do the math in my head, and he's been a parent in our district for a long time, and we're super excited to bring him in as part of our administrative team. So Levi, do you want to do any further introductions that you'd like to?
No, I appreciate the opportunity that we have to come before the board, and I appreciate the support that we have in offering this position to Dave. He is going to be able to help us make some great changes. Bonneville High School, it's a great school. We've got some great things going, but he brings some talents and skills that I think are going to help us take those next steps and get to the next level. So I'm really excited. I'm going to miss Ben. I love Ben to death. He's going to do great things at Discovery, but we're equally as excited to have Dave coming on board. So, Mr. Dave England.
Thank you. Just very excited to be here. Like Dr. Wilson said, I've been, well, even going back further, student graduating from the district, Hillcrest, all my kids graduating from the district as well. Just excited to be here and be able to work at Bonneville High School, work with the staff, and really just be able to serve the students and this community. I love it. I think it's the best district out here, and I'm just grateful to be here.
We're excited to get you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
And then the second candidate I've known just a few years longer than that, I think. And so Corey Telford has hired an assistant principal for Bonneville Online High School to help him with that, as well as to supervise the Praxium program, which will be our magnet program for mastery-based learning for 7th and 8th grade students. So Nancy Jackson has been recommended, and the board approved her to be the assistant principal and to keep Corey on the straight and narrow, which is a full-time job. So Corey, if you don't mind coming up and introducing Nancy, that'd be fantastic.
Really excited to have Nancy be part of our staff and take on the Praxium program and the leadership role within the Praxium program. Nancy was by far and away our #1 candidate across the board, and I've known Nancy from the time I started at the online school, and I've known Nancy in a leadership role as a teacher, and she's amazing, and excited to have her be part of our staff. And I don't know if anybody can keep me on the straight and narrow, so.
I am super excited to work with Mr. Telford, and I appreciate the opportunity. I guess you're a non-traditional learning. I have a passion for online school, and I've really jumped in this last year to mastery-based learning. I've loved it equally, and when this job came up and both roles were part of that, I just thought, this is what I do, this is what I know, and I'm excited to bring that passion to Bonneville Online High School. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. We're super excited.
Chairman Landers, if I could just say one thing that really struck me and impressed me with the hires for both of these positions is both Levi and Corey said the same thing about their hires, and that is they recognized in them strengths that they didn't have themselves. And I just really appreciate that we have the quality of leaders in our district that recognize that they're not perfect, that there's that great leaders bring in people that can complement their strengths and make their team better, and it just speaks volumes about the capabilities and the leadership that we have in the district. So.
We've got some great people. All right. Well, congratulations, you guys. We're super excited about that, and so glad that you guys accepted and even applied. We're just grateful. All right. We have something fun on our agenda. We get to recognize a pretty awesome student. Lorenzo, you don't know this probably, but I have a son at Hillcrest, and he tells me what an amazing wrestler you are. And I also have a nephew on the Hillcrest wrestling team as well. And they tell me how great you are. So I'm super excited. We're going to turn the time over to our athletic director from Hillcrest, Wendy Johnson, and also the coach, Corey Tolliver. Is Corey here? Yes, Corey. Okay. Come on up, Lorenzo and Matt. Sweet. Okay. Awesome.
Thank you. I just love watching wrestling because I am in pain every time I watch them in their positions and stuff, but I'm very thankful for the coaches we have. Corey's our head coach, and Matt Tolliver's a new assistant coach to our program. And we're super excited about Lorenzo, senior, who waltzed through the state tournament. It was fantastic to watch him. I don't think he was challenged even one time over at state. He was a class act, and something to be very, very proud of for District 93, because he handled himself very well and represented our district and our program extremely well. So I'll turn it over to coaches.
Okay. I'm Corey Tolliver. And this is Coach Matt Vandermeer. I don't want to take a lot of credit for getting Lorenzo really turned around this year. Lorenzo had a tough run. He was a 4-time state qualifier, never made it to a placement round any of the years that he was at the state tournament. And this year, it was just, he had a completely different mindset and attitude about wrestling. And he just excelled and dominated everybody that he wrestled this year. Not only did he win the state championship, he was also voted as the High Country Conference all outstanding wrestler for the middleweights. And then, I don't know if you guys saw in the East Idaho Tribune, they did an article, and he was voted the all-area wrestler of the year. They did a really nice article and write-up on him, and really kind of gave the Hillcrest Wrestling program and some good props. So we're upcoming program, kind of hasn't been real great in recent years, but we really hope to turn that around. And we've got some good coaches and whatnot going on right now, so we're excited.
That's awesome.
Awesome. Lorenzo, we'd like to hear from you as well. Maybe just you can share with us your experience, or.
So I'm obviously very grateful for the opportunity to be able to compete, especially during the pandemic, and extremely blessed to go out of my senior year, state champ, after 3 times in non-placing. Just a dream come true. Got to give my credit to the coaches, of course. Beat me up every day, get me ready.
Lorenzo, what are your plans like upon graduation?
Graduating, I'm talking with a few colleges, but we'll see where it goes from there. Right now, I'm just oblivious and just living out the rest of my senior year.
That's awesome.
What weight class did you wrestle?
I went from 45, and then I got tired of cutting weight, so I went up a weight class, 52.
Okay. That's awesome.
Do you think that was the trick?
You know, it was a fun time. That's all I can say.
Well, you did amazing. I know a lot of the kids look up to you, and anyway, you're just awesome. So
Thank you.
Lorenzo, the wrestler you beat for the state championship, where was he from?
He was from Minico.
Okay. Strong program over there.
Oh yeah.
wow.
Great. Congratulations. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
And then we would like you to come on up and shake our hands, and I've got a certificate for you. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so on the clipboard in the back, do we have any public input here? Do we have any online, Mary? Okay. All right, so we're gonna skip our public input portion of our meeting since we don't have any input. We're gonna go ahead and move on and invite John Pym to present our construction report.
Chairman Landers, Board, it's a big day. At Black Canyon, we received our temporary certificate of occupation for the building today, which means all the plumbing, electrical, HVAC, all those things have been completed. We're just down now to our punch list items, a few more bits of flooring, some of the landscaping outside. They're just waiting till we get water before they lay the last of the sod, etc. And so we're just really on the cusp of walking in and taking possession of the building. I know Mr. Miller is very excited. They've told him he can open shop in there 1st of May and set up his office. He has big plans to do that. We'll take delivery of our furnishings for the building on May 31st. And so we're on track. Things are going great. And we're going to have a great building.
That's super exciting.
That's great.
John, are we on budget, below budget? How did we turn out? Still probably more to use, but.
There is. I think we'll be under the amount of money that was allotted for the building, at least on the construction side of things for sure. Craig's got some furnishing things in that are right here at the last, and I'm not exactly sure how that will come out ultimately. But as far as what the board budgeted for the building, we're under that on the construction side. And in addition to that, of course, the funds earned interest while we're building, and we have not dipped into any of those earnings at this point. So we feel very good about where we are on the budget side of the building.
Great, thank you. We're very fortunate that we built that building when we did, because if it were to bid today,
Yes, it would.
25% higher, do you think, or more?
Some materials have doubled, and so it would be a very different story. And I'm sure probably some of our folks that bid that building might have got hurt a little bit on this project because of those increases in costs. But it has turned out very well for the district.
Great.
Just so the board knows, in response to that question, it does put us in an interesting position because, as John alluded to, we have somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 million between what we collected in interest that we haven't had to spend on the building, and then what could be left in the contingency. And we got a memo from Nick Miller on the uses of that, and it's really interesting because there's both federal statute that governs that and state statute, and they more often than not contradict each other. So the bottom line is we'll have to have some discussions in work session on what we can do with that money, because likely it is we'll have to go back out to our voters to seek approval for an alternate use for those funds. So we'll just talk about that in a work session. or we dedicate it to lands, because the Black Canyon will be completed, the Iona roof was completed, Falls Valley was completed. So we could either put it towards land purchases, or we could talk about going to voters and seeking approval for an alternate use, so.
When we did have the wording on that bond, Scott, can you remind me, when we had the land purchases as part of that, of what we could use the funds for, did we have a price put with that, or was
No,
it just empty?
no, we had internal discussions about how much out of it we were going to allocate towards
Yeah,
it, but we can
okay.
always allocate
So it was
more.
just our
Yes.
discussions, okay. Okay, I personally think it would be amazing to be able to go through once they do get the furnishing as a board. So, and you said May 31st is when they're looking at that?
Correct. The install will take probably about 2 weeks, so it'll arrive May 31st. We anticipate about a 2-week period to get everything in place and then clean back up. And
So sometime into June, we could maybe go through and,
absolutely.
Yeah, I'd like that too.
And Craig and I have had some discussions about ultimately, what a ribbon cutting open house might look like. And I think Craig has 2 things in mind. One is to do something similar to what we did at Thunder Ridge, where in June, once it's furnished, we would have an open house. They would offer the T-shirts and other school swag for sale, let people see the building, and then on the back to school night, we would do a formal ribbon cutting ceremony for the school with the board, architects, etc. So.
okay,
Great. Sounds awesome.
yeah, it does, sounds great. It's exciting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
It's always good to be the bearer of good news in our meetings. All right. Keith, report on the state of the district with our population trends.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to discuss some of the trends and new development that we're seeing in the district. Dr. Wilson-Humes asked me to take this opportunity as an annual basis as one of the reports to the board on where things are at in the district. As I've really focused on and looked at what's going on in our community, you don't have to go very far to see there's just a boom. We've got construction everywhere you look. There's signs up for new developments coming, potentially housing, residential, commercial, and there's just a huge increase all through the community. You don't have to drive very far to see that. And so as I focused on tonight, I really wanted to focus on what might impact us over the next 12 months. What are current developments? We could talk all night about potential things that might happen. So-and-so owns this land, they're gonna develop it in the future. Might be 18 months, might be 2 years. And so I really want to focus tonight just on what's current and what's going to impact our school district over the next 12 months, maybe into 18 months. So as I've done that, I've really tried to kind of divide the district up into 3 zones and just to follow the high school boundaries. Scott, you might have to click for me, it's not. So I'm just going to start on the north end of the district. I've highlighted some key areas, and then I've got some maps that I'll show you and give you a little bit of a better idea of what that development looks like. The first area is pretty much directly across the street from where we're at right now. Berkeley Park, Hatch Hollow, Sierra Springs. It's that Rockwell subdivision. It's really 3 separate subdivisions, but over the next 12 to 18 months, immediately starting right now, they anticipate 150 plus homes in that area. Right now in the Berkeley Park area, there's 61 homes under construction in some phase of construction, and they'll finish out that Berkeley Park this summer, and immediately we'll start moving into Hatch Hollow and Sierra Springs. Just down north of us right now, Wolf Creek, it's the backside, kind of butts up to our property over here where the elementary school potentially could sit. That's a Liberty Homes subdivision. I met with them. They are looking at 50 homes this year, and they have 25 of those homes under construction right now. In the upcoming future, there's 130 lots in those subdivisions. Both of those areas will impact Discovery Elementary. Moving forward in the Bonneville school area is Bridgewater subdivision. It's a very sustained subdivision. It's been here for a number of years, but last fall they did open up 2 new phases for that subdivision. I'll show you that on the map. In both phases of that subdivision, we're looking at 55 homes and 48 townhomes, and that will impact Bridgewater. And then directly, if you continue through the field of Bridgewater, probably easier to identify on First Street. We have those apartments at First Street, the First Street residence. The subdivision directly behind that to the north is Simplicity, and it's a Karchner subdivision. There's approximately 15 to 20 home lots available in there right now. There's multiple phases. I did visit with Karchner Homes, and they anticipate continuing that entire complex and completing that over the next 12 to 18 months, potentially into 2 years. That also will impact Bridgewater. And then a lesser area of concern, but still a pretty significant growth area for Yukon. Just as you come into Yukon at the flashing light, there's the Good to Go gas station. If you turn east, there's a complex going up right now of 4plexes. There's 11 units being built, or 11 buildings, which will house 44 total units in that area. They do anticipate all 11 of those complexes being done this summer into the fall, and that will impact Yukon's boundary.
Heath, who's the developer on that one?
Liberty Homes is the builder. I'm not sure who's actually developing that. So I've identified just those core areas that we've talked about, so I just want to go through those. We'll start here with Berkeley Park. So this is Crowley. This would be Iona Road, and our school would be, or the Rocky Mountain Middle School would be right in this area. Berkeley Park, as you can see, that's a subdivision that's pretty much filled out. I drove through there early Saturday morning before it got too busy. They have foundations, 60+ foundations in the ground right now. They are completing that subdivision and moving immediately into Hatch Hollow. If you drive into that area, they have roads graded, sewer systems in, and will immediately start homes in Hatch Hollow this spring and into the summertime. And then if you move directly to the west of that is Sierra Springs. So basically this entire area, this spot right here is Liberty Homes. This spot right here is our school district property, and then everything else is Hatch Hollow, Sierra Springs. When I spoke to Rockwell on the phone, they anticipate those two, Hatch Hollow and Sierra Springs, being completed in the next 2 years. So if you look at the density of Berkeley Park down in this area, we're pretty much going to match that through this area and through Wolf Creek. This subdivision here is Rock River. It's a Liberty Homes subdivision. It's completed. I believe there's one home that's still under construction. Otherwise, it's completed. And all of the rest of this part of the square mile is completed, and they're moving on. So obviously, it's a pretty dense area. It's an area that's been a concern for us for a number of years. It was impacted by boundary changes last year as we made some of those shifts. And it's going to be an ongoing concern for the district as to how do we accommodate, I would anticipate probably 30 to 40% more homes of what is already there in that part of the subdivision. So this entire area is Discovery Elementary and zoned for Bonneville High School. Scott, if you'll hit the next slide. The next slide, I believe, is Bridgewater. Thank you. There we go. So if we just kind of
You're fired, Scott.
it skipped again.
Where's the IT?
Maybe it's starting to think and shifting on mine. So just kind of get some bearings on where we're talking. If we were to, this area right here is the First Street Residence Apartments. So Tiebreaker Elementary would be right across the street. Bridgewater Elementary School would be right in this area, and the Maverick would be right here on the corner of Ammon Road. So this is the backside of Bridgewater. If you've driven in there in the last 12 months, they've completely finished those phases in Bridgewater, and they've crossed the canal, which is right here. Probably 30 to 40 homes that have been added into that phase of Bridgewater that are now complete, and they're all moving in that direction. The subdivision in Bridgewater was not plotted on this map, but essentially you take this line straight down into Fox Hollow and across. The first phase is all of these homes right here, and then the second phase is just below it. They do have roads and sewer graded. They have not paved, blacktopped the roads all the way through, but that is definitely an area that I would anticipate in the next 12 to 18 months will be closed out and finished in that Bridgewater subdivision. Simplicity is growing at a little bit of a slower pace. So I would anticipate this is going to take a longer period, but all of the rest of this land up into behind Bridgewater is going to be filled with homes in Simplicity. When I talked to Karchner this morning, they've got some other projects that they're working on, but they do anticipate this picking up in this area in the upcoming months. Moving to Thunder Ridge, a couple of subdivisions. The villas, I was a little bit surprised when I drove through and counted the lots in the villas. I didn't anticipate it being as big as it was. There's 71 lots in the villas, and 45 of those homes are under construction. Or they've had homes completed in the last 3 to 6 months since they started that subdivision. That is a final phase. However, just to the east of the villas, the west of the villas, there is more land between Crowley and the villas that I anticipate will move into development as well. That will impact Rimrock. Freedom Fields is a subdivision in Iona, a Rockwell subdivision. There's 31 current building projects going on in Freedom Fields, and they have 60 additional homes. That project is completely ready to go. When I talked to Rockwell, they are not planning on putting any more lots in this summer, but before snow flies, they'll probably put in another 30 lots. So by next summer, they'll have all 90 of those homes done and completed, and that's going to impact Iona Elementary. Founders Point, Hawks Landing, 32 lots up in that area, primarily Hawks Landing. There's multiple phases, but there's 17 homes under construction there. That also impacts Rimrock, which is one of those schools that we're right at the seams. It's Rimrock, Iona are two of our largest elementary schools right now. And then the avenues would impact Cloverdale Elementary School, right on the corner of Lincoln Road and Crowley. There are 27 homes under construction right now, and they have they're currently in the fields putting in the roads for the next phase. So I wasn't able to contact that one's they have a developer, but it's not a single builder, and none of these except for Freedom Fields, they're individual variety of builders. It's not a single builder building that neighborhood.
Which corner of the intersection is the
It's on the northwest corner is the avenues. Yep. So this is the villas. If you're familiar with the villas, this is Rimrock Elementary School. And so this is a very well-established neighborhood. It's probably been there 15-ish years, Doug. Doug's not listening. 15-ish years on the villas? Yes. Yeah, so it's a very developed neighborhood right here, very established. This back section, and then actually this part right here doesn't actually dead end. It continues all the way out to 21st Street. The road's in, there's homes being built on that right now. And then there's a handful of I can't remember if it's 4 or 6 duplex townhouses that'll go right at the entrance there. So 71 homes plus the duplexes that will be coming into the villas, again impacting Rimrock Elementary. This Freedom Fields is the one out in Iona that's nearing completion. This is at the end of Main Street. So if you go past the post office and just keep going straight or down, can't remember what this road's called, 41st, but a lot of people might refer to it as the Hatch Lane. So if you come down, it'll drop you right into Freedom Fields. There are 31 homes under construction with 90 more, and they do have all of this area developed. Roads are in, foundations all around. Really right now they're focusing kind of in this middle section and then up the east side, and then they'll work to the west. I did also find out that there is some immediate construction happening right in this area. I do not remember what it's called. There's 37 1-acre lots currently being developed right in this field that would basically back up to this small subdivision right here behind Freedom Fields. So pretty significant growth out in the Iona area that will impact, again, one of our larger elementary schools. And then the other one for Thunder Ridge, Sunnyside. So if you go up Sunnyside past the Ammon Cemetery, you'll come to Founders Point, which is this vicinity right here. Just past Founders Point is Hawks Landing. They have multiple phases in Hawks Landing. Right now I have to look at my cheat sheet. 17 current under construction with 32 lots available immediately in Hawks Landing. And we should have one more for the avenues, Scott. I must have missed that. Will you back up? I think I've got the avenues on that other one. I'll have to come, I must have missed the avenues on that one. I might have it at the end, so we'll go through the rest of them. The last area dividing up is Hillcrest. You know, it's interesting because for years we've talked about the growth in the districts happening on the northeast corner, and I was absolutely shocked with what I saw when I drove through the west, southeast part of the district. There's a ton of growth that's happening out in that area. Silver Springs is back behind, not Woodland Hills, but Cortland Ridge. Yeah, it used to be Highland Springs, Silver Springs. I'm not sure if they've decided on what that's actually going to be called. It's a somewhat developed. There's probably 15 to 25 homes in that area right now. Liberty Homes is the developer of that. They did punch a road in last fall. There's 2 homes in current construction right now. When I talked to Levi Jarvis from Liberty Homes, he anticipates 37 homes this summer going up in that area. There's 56 total in that subdivision. Mountain Bend Estates is across the street from Cortland Ridge. It's nearing completion. There's 8 lots left and 5 under construction right now, and then that will complete that subdivision. Hidden Valley's a new Rockwell subdivision. If you go directly behind Woodland Hills, they anticipate 50 to 60 homes this summer, and then there'll be multiple phases after that. Basically, if we look at the square mileage that we just looked at with Summit Hills, Red Rock, and Berkeley Park, that's really what I anticipate on that backside of Woodland Hills moving forward as they move south. Brookside, this is completely off my radar. I drove through that area Saturday morning. It's a very well-established neighborhood, and as you drive through that neighborhood north, they have a huge phase going on back there. 12 current homes under construction, 40 lots available right there with an immediate phase going in right now. They're putting in sewer and roads. Completely off my radar. I wasn't sure what, just nothing I'd ever seen, not that area that I'm familiar with. The other area that I was a little bit shocked with is the southeastern townhomes, just south of Cabela's. It's a project, I apologize, I forget who the developer is. Knife River is the project manager. It is a high-density project. They're putting in 153 units. They anticipate those being done this summer, all 153 of them. They are currently already placing residents in those facilities. They have moved into the first 2 buildings. Right now, they are rentals. It'll be a complex of rentals, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. There's not an additional phase right now, but he did tell me today there is land to the east, and they anticipate that'll continue to grow in that area. So I was really quite surprised with that development. And the hard thing with those townhomes and rentals, we don't know how exactly it'll impact our school district. When First Street Residence was built, it had very little impact on Bridgewater Elementary. We didn't see a ton of those residents living there with school-age children, and it didn't have a major impact. And so this is kind of a little bit of a shot in the dark. We don't know what kind of impact a complex like this will have on our school district. And then the last area is Granite Creek. Granite Creek's one of those subdivisions that's been a little bit slower. It's just to the east of Sand Creek Golf Course. On their sign, they have 6 lots, 5 under construction, and on their sign it says next phase coming summer of 2020. And so I anticipate as quickly as they can get going. They're a little bit behind. There's no construction out there right now, no roads being developed, no sewer lines, but I anticipate they'll be moving as quickly as they can in that area. So just looking at what those areas look like on those maps. So Cortland Ridge, this would be Woodland Hills Elementary School. Mountain Bend Estates, that's a subdivision that's nearing completion, 8 lots left. This is that Highland Springs, Silver Springs that Liberty's putting in. So if we look at this right now, this part of the subdivisions here, And what's new is all of this area right here. And so he's punched out a road over the canal right here, exiting onto Crowley, coming out right there. So right now there's only 2 homes under construction there, but he fully anticipates and has a long list of projects that'll be started this summer in that area. And then this is that Hidden Valley. That's not Hidden Valley, that's part of Silver Springs. Hidden Valley is basically from this area right here out to Ammon Road. That's where they'll start the development. There is a private landowners right in this area, and then pretty much everything else in this part of the subdivision, with a few homes that are speckled in there, and property of the district is owned by Rockwell Homes and will continue to be developed there.
And Keith, you haven't even gone up on the hill.
No.
The hill's out of control.
Yeah, up Camor Loma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
Blackhawk too.
So the last area, just to highlight tonight, Granite Creek. This is the one we talked about. It's 8 lots, still working on that construction. This is that Brookside subdivision. This area right here is the current area that's under construction. Those are those 40 lots. And then this is the area that they are working on right now. So pretty significant growth in that area. And then this is the current stable or long-term area that people have lived in for quite a while. And then this is another area, I don't know how it'll impact us. The Providence Point, I didn't mention that, but this is a 55 plus adults area. I don't know what that means. I don't know how that will be, how that will come in our community, but that's a fairly large in phase 1 of an area with a ton of open space behind it. And so we've got a lot of land out in that area for homes to come into.
So Heath, on the paper that we got for the public meeting for that piece to the west,
This
right
one?
there, supposedly all of those in that phase are homes minus that block in the middle, and those are townhomes.
Townhomes.
So that's the 55 and up, but the rest
Oh,
are
okay,
homes.
so the rest of it around it's homes, and
And
then
then to the left of that, which you don't even have on there, they just approved an entire community, literally an entire community of 55 and up homes, and it's gonna be, how many residents, John, do you remember? It's in the hundreds, but that one's
Yeah.
55 and up, but
well,
that
and,
won't impact our district, but that one's all homes.
and that's the reality that we're in right now, Amy, is we could go through all of these empty fields and talk about who owns it and who's developing it and when it's coming, and there's not a lot of space that potentially couldn't be homes in the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, it's we're going to see that continue to boom all through our school district, and people want to be here. So the only other, this is that southeastern townhomes, so Cabela's would be right in this vicinity. High density. I stopped Saturday morning and walked through a couple of them. Like I said, they're 1, 2, 3 bedroom, single garage, 4plexes basically, with a few adjustments throughout, but completely off my radar. And if you haven't been that way, drive by, because it grabs your attention immediately. It was a little bit overwhelming just to see that growth in such a high dense area right there. So that's in a nutshell just kind of what I identified as being big areas of development. Obviously it's not a complete list. There's homes being built in communities. There's sporadic homes out in Iona that are a couple of lots here, a couple lots here, obviously up on the hill. Rimrock's got some things going on just below Rimrock. My mind just went blank on what that little area is called. Quail Ridge. There's some development going there. But these are the big areas that I've identified that are going to have the greatest impact, and also impact the schools that we've already been aware of and concerned of. So Scott, if you can hit the last slide. These are the schools that I identify are our greatest areas of concern. They're also our largest schools, with the exception of Ammon. But we also have seen a huge area of Ammon that is going to be pulled in, new growth in that Ammon boundary that's going to be pulled in. So as we look at planning, growth, we adjusted boundaries 2 years ago to balance some of these schools. We had a pretty lengthy conversation about hopefully that's a opportunity to prevent changes for several years, if not longer. And at that time, we said it's an unknown. We don't know what's going to happen with our growth. We don't know where people are going to move to. But we know that these schools continue to be an area of concern. They are some of our largest schools. Their capacity, many of these schools already have modular buildings. Most of them are maxed out with the capacity of what they can hold in modular buildings. And so as we look at future planning and preparation for our school district, knowing the growth's not going to slow down anytime in the near future, it's right where we've projected, it's right where we've talked about. We've got the north end of the district that's got a boom, and we've got the south end of the district that's got a boom, and it's going to take a lot of discussion and support in the community to determine how do we move forward in planning and accommodating the growth that we're seeing in our school district. Any questions, concerns?
Well, the one thing that you're aware of it, that will affect Summit Hills is what I call the Tevin Johnson farm.
Yes.
So that may not move until fall,
Yeah.
but that's going to impact Summit Hills.
And that's a pretty significant area. I had a conversation with Karchner this morning. It's delayed a little bit because they've run into some complications with the canal running through that area, but they do anticipate starting that late fall. Their hopes is to start that late fall, worst case scenario next spring. So it's definitely going to have an impact on our school district and a huge area. For those of you that aren't familiar with that area, it's just east of Summit Hills Elementary. It's basically the corner of Iona Road, Hit Road to the railroad tracks, that open field all through that area. So it's a pretty significant portion of land that will be developed, similar to those other neighborhoods where it's third-acre lots and a lot of single-family homes, but packed in fairly tightly. So. Other questions? Thank you.
I don't know if anybody else has heard this. Somebody that I know said that they saw a report that in the next decade that Idaho Falls is going to be one of the most unaffordable places to live in the nation. Have you guys seen that report?
I haven't seen that formally, but certainly anecdotally,
Oh,
I have seen it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
just
it's nuts.
wish that we could have an easier time passing school bonds. I mean, there's definitely a need for to get impact fees from the developers on these properties, because I just don't know when we can't pass anything, how in the heck we're supposed to keep up. It's a fun discussion for another day.
Chairman Landers with Mr. Hunsaker here. It might just be good to see if he has anything to add or if he feels like there's anything else significant the board should be aware
Yeah,
of.
come on up, Tom.
Run through the slide backwards.
Backwards.
Or it's either direction, but there's some more coming. You may have heard of them, you may not. Just want to make sure you're aware of them. It may not be the next year, but some of them I think will be. So I think the next to last slide is showing that those very dense, single story, but very dense background across the street from the end of the Baptist church. In between Cabela's and that development is also zoned the same way, only that one's slated to be three-story.
Oh.
City council's negotiating right now with them to see if they actually go through with it, but they've already basically approved the concept. And that'll be 16 units per acre. They have, I can't remember how many units, but that one's coming. North of the Ammon Cemetery, going on up to the cottages, what was going to be part of the cottages, Brogan Creek is going to be coming in with quite a few homes. It's going through my memory as we're going through the slide. Oh yeah, start popping back in my mind. One which won't impact us immediately, but in the county up, just go up here to Regis Corner, and I'm sure you know about this one. We've already approved some, 8 units per building, townhomes. It'll be the southeast corner area, not quite all the way to that intersection on Hammond Road here, but it will be abutting, if we approve the second part in a couple of weeks, more of those townhomes right up against the highway, US 26. Simplicity, or whatever the name is of that one north of the First Street Apartments. Yeah, that one is aimed at 55 plus. How many grandkids are living with grandma and grandpa these days? So it'll be a lower impact, but
Yeah.
just factor in that's a 55 plus apartment aiming for them. There's a few others, but those are the ones that popped in my mind. Oh, yes, south of the soccer complex that IUMCA has on the corner of Sunnyside and Hammond Road,
yeah.
the other direction. 98 townhome, well, no, those would be apartments. So they've gotten their plat approved, so when they'll actually start building, you probably know more than I do, but that one's done.
And
That's that
that's
Olson
Ammon.
farm or
That's
whatever.
Ammon boundary.
Pardon me?
That's Ammon
Yeah.
boundary.
Yes.
And then Rockville also owns some land across the street on the east side of
Of Ammon Road.
And
South
I
of
think
Maverick.
they're working on okay, go to the east side of Ammon Road, south of Sunnyside, and they're getting that one rezoned for, that's one that just went to planning and zoning city council, has not heard it yet. More homes there, I can't remember the number, it was something like 98, I think, of the single families attached, and oh, 16, something like that, of the,
Yeah.
attached, I think there were 4 units per building townhomes in there. So, yeah, it just keeps coming.
Yeah. Neon to the right.
Thank you.
And I think, just going back to the comments, I think we're going to see more of those multi-level units coming in. It becomes more and more difficult buying land and expensive building increases. We typically haven't been a community of those types of complexes, and I think we're going to see more and more of that in the future.
Yeah.
Well, Tom, I said welcome back, but I don't know if we want you back telling us all this stuff. All right. Not so fun discussion. Dr. Wilstenhume and Mr. Wainsgard talking about our budget, levy,
Yeah.
cuts, fun stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman Landers. So, I submitted to the board, and it'll be in the minutes, but a full report. I just wanted to highlight some of the key things that we have to be looking at as we do prepare the budget or budgets for next school year. So, first of all, this is from our last audit. So it goes back to FY20, and something that I know the board's aware of, but I think it's very important for our patrons to be aware of as well, and that is just shy of 90% of our budget goes to salaries and benefits. 88% goes to salaries and benefits. And so as we look at potentially the loss of the supplemental levy and the plant facilities levy, there's no way to reach reducing our budget by approximately $10 million without impacting salaries and benefits. And then you can see the other categories we have are purchase services, which was 7% of the budget, and materials and supplies, which is 5%. So I'll just say, if you pay attention to social media posts and the pot shots that people want to take at the district, they talk about, you know, wasting dollars, and I'm all for taking a hard look and saying, are we using our funds wisely? But if you look at the big picture, and literally when we're talking millions of dollars, again, 90% of that goes to salaries and benefits, and so that has to be the place that we take into consideration with the potential loss of those funds. So really, there's only two ways to reduce cost from salaries and benefits. You can either reduce your staff or you cut their pay, or some combination of both of those. But those are the two options we have when it comes to looking at reducing our budget. Most private businesses have the ability to reduce their staff when their budgets come tight. I'd say that's probably one of the first things they do is they start to lay off staff and make those reductions. I would say most public agencies have that same ability. In Idaho, our state legislature likes to govern very tightly how we run our school districts, and so there's some state laws that make it very difficult for us to do those staff reductions. So the first one is Idaho Code 331004. This is the use it or lose it law that basically says if we don't hire the minimum number of teachers that the state expects us to, then we lose funding from the state. So it makes no sense to lay off teachers if we're going to lose all the associated funding that goes with those positions from the state. And Guy, correct me on this. This is one of those points I should have verified with you, but that doesn't just affect the teaching positions. It's also the associated funding that goes with those, right? So, so basically, the way the state funding works is they identify a classroom unit that's primarily a teacher, and then they add a fraction for an administrator from that unit. They add a fraction for classified positions from that unit. So we lose all of that funding, not just the teaching positions. So we've been very tight on our teacher hiring and the reason we've been so tight is that gives us as much flexibility as we can with our dollars to keep our teacher pay high. So by hiring the fewest number of teachers, that gives us the most amount of dollars to keep their pay where we believe it should be. But every year that we lose the percentage of that, it impacts our supplemental levy. We have to use more local dollars to keep the pay where it's been. Does that make sense? So,
Scott, let me jump in real quick.
Thanks, Guy.
So the classified admin don't get reduced. What gets also reduced is the benefits associated.
The benefits, okay. Okay, so we would retain the classified and admin, but not the benefits portion. Thank you, Guy. I appreciate that.
And I'm not sure what I'm about to say is right, but let me think out loud and you can react. If we're paying the teacher that is laid off more than what the state funds, which generally we do, maybe there's some small savings to the district by laying
Yeah.
people off.
Yep.
You lose that state funding.
Yep, there would be, yep, so for the percentage of teachers that we pay above the state, which is our most veteran teachers, it's really anybody with 15 years of experience or more, then there would be that additional savings.
Pretty small
Yep.
incremental stuff probably. But
Yep,
okay.
yep, and really, for all the teachers that have 15 years of experience or less, they earn, at the most they earn is what the state funds us. So then administrative positions, again, this is a favorite target of our critics, saying that we're overstaffed and overpaid when it comes to administrative positions. So just a few points I think it's critical for the board to be aware of, and again for our public to be aware of. We do not have that same restriction on hiring a minimum number of administrators that we have with teachers. And so we currently this year have hired 85% of the number of administrators that we're funded for. And so that 15% savings, we can turn that into additional pay for our administrators above and beyond what the state pays that. That turns out to mean that our principals end up supervising or being responsible for, on average, 380 students and 36 employees. So again, I would just say if you compare that to private industry, you're not going to find very many private industries where somebody's supervising 36 other employees. And principals just do incredible work. Everybody wants to have great teachers in the classroom, and I'll be a believer to my dying day that it takes a great principal to hire great teachers, to evaluate great teachers, to have the right conversations with our teachers to make sure everybody's meeting high expectations. You'll always have teachers that are naturally great, but to have a great teacher in every classroom takes a great principal. And I'm a believer. And one of the criticisms that I was made aware of on Facebook, I really don't follow it, but I have a wife that does, and so she's happy to share with me the information that's shared out there. But one of the interesting contrasts, or one of the criticisms was, in District 93 we pay our teachers less than District 91 does, but we pay our principals more. Now, number one, I don't know if that's true or not. I haven't sat down and done the analysis. I don't spend a lot of time looking at those comparisons. But I would say in the early 2000s, that was very much the philosophy of the district, because we couldn't match teacher pay. There was no way we could match teacher pay without a huge increase to the supplemental levy. What we could do is, with a smaller number of principals, we could increase the pay and attract great principals. And by attracting great principals, we believe we could create and attract great teachers. And I would say I think that philosophy has borne itself out, and I still fully support that we need to attract great principals into our district, and they create the cultures in their buildings that make teachers want to come here, even if it doesn't mean they make as much as neighboring districts. And then another key thing that I think is important to know is At the district level, if you go back to 2010, which is my first year coming into the district office, we've eliminated 5 district level positions from our central office administration over that decade. We've done that at the same time that we've grown by thousands of students. And so if you look at a ratio of how many district level administrators we have compared to kids, it's almost half as many as we had back in 2010. The way we've accomplished that is we're all taking on a bigger workload. And so John Pym has taken on a position that was 2 positions in the past. In 2011, I took on 3 positions instead of the 1 that I was hired for, and then since then we've been able to shift some of those around. So Gordon Howard's fulfilling multiple positions. Guy is taking on additional responsibilities with supervising transportation and child nutrition. Heath and Jason and I are all sharing the additional workload from not replacing a deputy superintendent. And so, and I think that that's a key thing for people to know is when the board made the decision to buy out, I wouldn't use the word buyout, but when they made the decision to end Dr. Shackett's contract early and Mrs. McConnell retired the same year, the combination of those 2 factors, along with us negotiating for me to accept a lower salary than Dr. Shackett had, has resulted in a savings of, I had that number in here and I hope I still do. Nope. So I've got to do the math down in my head. So, so Dr. Shack was earning a salary of $167,000, and because again I accepted the salary of the deputy superintendent at the time. So basically that means over 2 years we've saved $165,000. I'll make it easy on myself. So $330,000, and the negotiated contract with him to end his contract early was $200,000. So the board has saved the district at least $160 some odd thousand just in salary. That doesn't take into account the reduced budgets that we have as a district because we don't have 2 administrative budgets that we're operating out of. We only have 1. There's been significant savings that has come to the district because of that decision. You'll never hear that from the critical side of things, but I think that's a key thing for our patrons to know is in any business situation, if you invest $200,000 and you get a $360,000 to $400,000 savings as a result, you're going to be celebrated. Unfortunately, with our critics, you're going to continue to be criticized for that decision because they don't want our patrons to know that actually resulted in additional savings to the district over the past 2 years. So that really brings us to classified positions. So I guess what I would say as a result of that is I do not believe that there's any way for us to cut administrative positions in the district. I think we've cut them to the absolute bare bone. I should know how the number of hours our principals are putting in, the number of hours our district employees, district level administrators are putting in. We're all sharing heavy workloads because the work hasn't changed. All those positions were there and they weren't people that were just sitting around doing nothing. And so we've all had to take on those additional responsibilities and put in a lot of hours to make sure the work still gets done. But we've been happy to do that because we know it's the right decision for the district and those savings matter. So classified positions, that is definitely where we have the most flexibility to some degree. And so I would just start with saying we've talked about this in the past, but some of our classified positions we specifically created after our voters approved an increase to the supplemental levy in 2016. Very specifically, our elementary PE and music paraprofessionals, we did not have those prior to that increase, and we brought those back because our voters approved that increase. We also were able to add additional groundskeeping and maintenance positions. We heard a lot of criticism for a few years about the condition of our grounds. We took that to heart, and we added additional positions to take better care of those, and I think we've seen the results of that. Those will be very hard to maintain those positions if we don't have the supplemental levy. In fact, as you say, they're going to be impossible to maintain those positions without a supplemental levy. Some other places, even though there's not state law that governs those, makes it very difficult for us to cut those positions. So for example, special education classified positions, there's a federal law that says we have to continue the same level of effort or investment in dollars in our students that our special education students that we had the previous year. It's called maintenance of effort. So we can't go and lay off a bunch of special education paraprofessionals because it's illegal. Is there a better way to say that, Guy?
We could, but we would lose that same amount of money in our federal fund.
So, yep, so we do it and we end up losing that same funding. So it doesn't save us any dollars. The other place that could potentially be cut is stipend positions. I can't even imagine us running school without extracurricular activities. But the bottom line is we pay $1 million every year in salaries and mandatory benefits. And so that's things like Social Security contribution, PERSI for those people that are PERSI eligible, workers' comp, those types of benefits. So $1 million every year goes towards stipend positions. So these are really outside the scope of any state law, and there is significant savings that could be had there.
Could you identify some of those positions so that
Yeah,
we know exactly
yeah.
what
So I mean, it's all of our athletic. So these are primarily at the high school. So it's all of our sports programs. So all of our coaching positions, football, basketball, volleyball, soccer, cross country, golf. I mean, the list goes on that side. It also includes the additional pay that people like for co-curricular. So things like our drama programs, our debate programs, our music programs, our performing arts, so drama programs. Those teachers receive an additional stipend to do the after-school portion of those programs. At the elementary and middle school, again, middle school, we do have some coaching stipends that are built into that and some of those same performing arts stipends. Very few of this at the elementary level. They're basically paid for our website managers, and there was one other one at elementary, and I'm drawing a blank on it. So, yep. So it's sports and those performing arts. That's by far the bulk of it. I'm saying that there's $1 million in savings, and if we have to get to a $10 million mark, and given those other restrictions we're facing, I personally don't see a way to do it. Now, if we really are in that situation, we're gonna have to put our heads together and really figure it out. But I really don't know how you get to $10 million without this type of a drastic cut. So those are the salaries and benefits side. Other potential, so then ways that we could reduce staff pay. So that's by reducing positions. So that's one option. Second option is to look at trying to reduce staff pay. So first of all, to reduce teacher salaries, there's two ways to do that. The first is we agree to it with the teachers in negotiations, or alternatively, the district could qualify for a financial emergency, and then the board could declare a financial emergency, and we could do it. The board could do it unilaterally. I think the loss of the supplemental levy would meet the threshold for the loss of funding, and we could do it. No, so it's a financial emergency. So there's a specific code that says, again, the two ways to reduce teacher salaries are you either agree to it through negotiations, or if the board is facing a financial emergency, and there's a specific definition of what that means. I can't remember what the percentage is. Yep. So then the board would declare a financial emergency, and then the board could just say across the board we're reducing teacher salaries, and the union would not have to agree to that. The challenge, so that's teachers. The challenge, and I don't think I highlighted this one. I did have a bullet on there. It's on actually the bottom one. The reality is we going back to my comment about the tight laws we have to follow, there are minimum salaries for teachers. And so while we could reduce teachers' pay for a lot of teachers, there are certain categories of teachers that we could not reduce their pay. Classified pay, same thing. We'd have to, if we reduced classified pay for specifically people in either title, I assume Guy, right, Title I would qualify as well as special education, then that would violate the federal requirement for maintenance of effort. And so what that puts us in a position of is reducing pay for some employees and not for others. And then, so that's just like across the board, we're going to reduce what the salary schedule looks like. The other option that we used back in 2009 was the furlough days. It looks like we could save potentially $300,000 for a non-working, non-paid furlough day. But again, I think legally, I'm not sure we could do that for everybody because of the state minimum salary. So if somebody's making the state minimum and then we're going to say we're going to furlough your, give you 5 furlough days, that would reduce it below the state minimum. I'd have to talk with Doug Nelson, but I'm pretty sure that would not be legal. So another way is we could negotiate to freeze teachers on the salary schedule again this year. That's what we had to do this year with the state holdbacks. But again, some teachers, just like we did this year, some teachers would still get an increase because the minimum salary for teachers goes up next year. But we could potentially save $1.5 million if our teachers accepted being frozen on the salary schedule for 2 years in a row. There was no minimum salary in 2009. That law came into effect with the career ladder. And even after, I think the career ladder might have just been within the last 3 years that I think we got a state minimum salary. So that's really the bottom line, is we had a lot of flexibility in 2009 that we simply don't have now. 2009 is when they changed the use it or lose it law and let districts go down to 90.5%. And then the next year they brought in a law that basically, for our district, the effect of that law is we've lost 0.5% a year since 2011. So we're up to 96% now. So basically we've lost flexibility of about 6%. That sounds like a small number. It's not a small number. I mean, hiring 6% fewer teachers for our district, that's about 40 teachers, and between salaries and benefits, you're talking 40 times about 70,000, 60,000, so $240,000 to $250,000 a year. No, $2.5 million. Sorry. Yeah, $2.5 million per year that we could be saving, but we can't. Yeah, and again, it's anyway. Class sizes would go up by about a student or two, but in exchange for that, we'd be realizing millions of dollars of savings. So then outside of that 90% salaries and benefits portion, there are a few ways we can save some dollars. We have a budget of about $500,000 per year from our operational budget that goes toward learning resources. We could simply not allocate that budget, and our teachers have lived by for a lot of years with less than adequate learning resources, and we could continue to do that. We spent another $300,000 per year in activity transportation, but our parents do have a pay-to-play fee, and that pay-to-play fee generates about $90,000 toward the district that we use for transportation. So $300,000 total cost, but our actual net cost after the parents' contribution is $210,000 that we would save. So between that and the salaries, we're looking at about a $1.2 million savings if we were to suspend our athletic and performing arts programs next year. From the plant facility side, we could potentially defer maintenance on about $500,000 to maybe $1 million. It's going to be pretty tight to get to $1 million. It's possible, but we're going to end up paying for that in the long term. I don't believe that that's a very good business strategy, but if we're in an emergency situation, there is about $500,000 to $1 million in our plant facilities budget that we could basically not allocate. The rest of the dollars really go towards ongoing annual costs that there really isn't a way to not spend those dollars. And then one of the comments that came through is, is there software that the district uses that you don't really have to have? I've thought of two. Qualtrics has been, I think, super valuable to us as a district. It's how we reach out and engage our parents and get feedback from our parents and from our students and from our staff. I think it's really helped us navigate through the shutdown and through reopening schools this year. We've had a ton of input from our parents, and it's been very helpful. But if we had to get by without it, we could get by without it. And we also, this is an interesting question, we do continue to provide Microsoft Office for our staff and for our students. Through that agreement, our students can actually purchase, or don't even have to purchase it, they can download that for free on their own devices. I think it's a great program. Microsoft predates our use of Google Apps, and we're using a ton of Google Apps now. And so if we really had to get by without Office, we could save about $50,000 to $60,000 if we stopped purchasing Office. So, so there is some savings that, again, I think there's reasons why we use that software. I don't think it's unnecessary. I don't think it's a waste. But again, if we're into a tight budget crunch and we're laying off people, then we've got to look at other things we're spending money on as well. So. So then we get into the additional revenue, and so fortunately, we should, I'm going to really emphasize the word should here, be receiving money from the federal government in response to the coronavirus. I want to start with highlighting the statement at the bottom, and that is the purpose for these funds coming from the federal government is to help schools safely reopen and sustain a safe operation and address the impact of coronavirus pandemic on students. That's what the funds are supposed to be used for. It's very clear in the federal guidance that's what they're supposed to be used for. They're not supposed to be used to give our patrons a tax break. If we have to, I mean, if the supplemental levy gets voted down, and we just have to use these to operate our schools, it's what we'll do, but it will come at a cost of how these dollars really could benefit our kids. And our kids, like we've talked about, our kids, we know are struggling this year. I think they're struggling academically, but our teachers have done a great job in the classroom, but nonetheless, our kids are struggling still academically, and there's programs and things that we would love to do with these dollars to help address those that loss of learning for our kids. We know they're struggling socially and emotionally. There are some things we could do with our facilities to help improve the safe conditions inside of our classrooms with these dollars if they're available. So I just want to make sure that we understand there's a very specific purpose that those dollars are supposed to be used for, and that is going to make it difficult to use them for some other purposes. So just real quickly, we've talked about this in the past. Our original allocation came last summer. It was $1.4 million. We were told that we had to use that for unbudgeted expenses, which means, and that we had to use it very specifically to respond to coronavirus. And so we did use those dollars. Are they all spent, Guy? Spent or encumbered now. Primarily they went to Chromebooks, they went to internet access for our kids, they went for personal protective equipment, they went to give our teachers the supplies they needed to teach both remotely last spring, and also to help them transition into blended learning this fall. But I would just say we did exactly what we were asked to do, or told to do, and that is spend these dollars for things you haven't budgeted for. You can't put it away in your savings account. You need to spend them, and you have to spend them by a certain date, and do it to respond to the coronavirus. So those dollars are gone. ESSER 2, probably the most important thing to know is this was authorized by the federal government in January, and it has still not been given to schools from the state. And so we're still waiting for the legislature to tell us, yep, you have authority to spend those dollars. And they've also basically put us in a situation where our only option to use those dollars is to backfill the loss of revenue from the state this year. I'm not going to go into the details of that, but that's the bottom line for us this year. Is there's not going to be any additional dollars, and the state board may make a difference on the bottom line with this one, but right now the bottom line with ESSER 2 is we're going to be $500,000 upside down on what our state holdback was compared to what we're getting from ESSER 2. The state board again may take action, or may have the legislature take action for us to not be $500,000 upside down, but that's all discussion and nothing's actually been finalized or provided to us.
I don't know why you don't have full confidence in the legislature.
I don't know either. So,
They've been great.
yeah,
They're really awesome.
yeah. So, and one of the challenges with ESSER 2 is again the directive from the state or from the federal government is these dollars should have been released to schools immediately. They haven't been. They were given to the state in January. They're supposed to be released. I can't remember what the deadline was, but it was within a very short time period. And we're sitting here in April and still haven't received authority to use those dollars. And it looks like the state's only going to give us authority to use half of the dollars this year and then the other half next year when there's not a budget holdback. So that's awesome that that's really what's led to that $500,000 deficit. So So then the last round, ESSER 3, this is, or ARP, I think is another acronym for the same thing. This is the one that was authorized under President Biden's administration. Again, still not authorized by the legislature, and so as much as people want us to include this in our budget for next year, we can't include money that hasn't been provided to us in our budget. We still don't know whether the state's going to hold back any funding. There really hasn't been discussion of that, but there wasn't discussion of it last year, and so I still have a hard time trusting that there couldn't be state holdbacks that we would have to use to back these dollars to backfill next year. And then out of that $11 million, it's not a wide open, use it for whatever you want to. 20% has to be used to address learning loss and address student social emotional needs. And then a really interesting thing, going back to that same thing we talked about earlier on the federal funds, if we lose a supplemental levy, and we use these ESSER 3 dollars all in 1 year, so that $11 million, if you subtract the 20% out, it's going to be pretty close to the combination of the loss of the supplemental and the plant facilities. So if we simply replace it with these dollars, it's going to create this huge spike in our federal dollars for 1 year, and we won't be able to continue that maintenance of effort the next year. And so then they're going to start withholding our federal dollars in subsequent years to make up what we haven't been able to maintain. So we're going to be shooting ourselves in the foot again if that's the position we're put in. So it doesn't paint a very bright picture on what our options are going forward, other than I hope and pray that our patrons will recognize the needs that we have and will support renewing those levies.
Well, Scott, is this on?
Just need a blue light on it, if that helps any.
The problem with the ESSER money, as I see it, is a one-time shot. And it creates a problem that you discussed.
Yeah.
And that is, the money's here, it's not here the next year, but if they, for budgetary purposes, if they see we've had all that money, and they, okay, moving forward, that's not available. So, I don't know, we just have to have it, we just have to work with the budget, with the dollars that we have available to us. And the one factor that drove home to me with this last election is that our district has become dependent on revenue that is not dependable. And that's a difficult position for the district to be in. I'm in favor of the supplemental levy. I wish that we could, as we move forward, if we could plan to gradually maybe reduce that if we can somehow cover costs or increase revenue from the state or somehow, but gradually plan to reduce that over a 10-year period, for example, and work towards that. With the growth that Heath talked about, I don't know if that's,
Yeah.
you know, how that would look, but
Yeah.
you just can't do it in 1 year.
Yeah. No, I wholeheartedly agree. It's a conversation we've had. Greg has been, talking about that as we've seen increased funding from the state, is it possible to decrease the supplemental? I do think it's possible. Especially with the state funding, what we call the third level of the career ladder, the advanced professional rungs, I do believe that we'll be able to use that to potentially reduce how much we have to pay out of the supplemental. There's other things, though, that it's really going to take some hard decisions on our part of if we truly want to wean away from the supplemental levy, that's going to take cuts. It's not just going to be matching the teacher salary schedule from the state. It's going to take more than that, and those cuts will impact programs for our kids. But you're right. I had multiple conversations with patrons. One theme was, if these aren't supplemental dollars, you shouldn't call it a supplemental levy. I wholeheartedly agree. These are not supplemental. They're very much operational. They're critical to what we do as a district. Nonetheless, the state law describes them as supplemental, and that's the language we have to use. But these are critical dollars for the success of our kids.
really a question as much as it is a comment. At what point do we start losing the very fine staff that we have carefully handpicked and gathered over a period of years? At what point do they say, we can't do this?
Yeah.
I guess the other comment I would make is I really appreciate the hard work of our superintendent. I think the board has noticed that and watched that, and for anybody to say that we're overstaffed administratively, they're just not aware of what's going on in the district. And so I'm very appreciative of the hard work that you've put in personally, Scott, because I've seen it. And the same goes with our other administrators. So, you know, I just hope our patrons recognize that.
Yeah. I do think what will help is as we continue to get growth in the district and we can control, you know, to a degree our costs. When we have to build a school, it's going to be hard to do, but I do anticipate that we'll see our levy rate continue to drop. And as we get closer to what our neighboring district's levy rate is, that will certainly help. And thankfully we've seen commercial growth and not just residential. I was talking to my in-laws in Shelley. They're in a tough spot because they have all residential and agriculture, and we've been blessed that thankfully we have we have a growing commercial tax base, and that really does take some of the burden off of our homeowners.
Well, and there's no motion for this, Scott.
No, this is
so
just a report to the board.
FYI.
Yep.
And, yeah. I'm assuming we'll just keep on talking about this until
Well,
the levy
yeah, so, I mean, guys,
goes on.
I think Guy's intent, I'm not sure how you're doing the budget right now. Guy, do you know how you're doing the budget? I mean, that March levy date was critical because it really helped govern how we were going to set the budget, and now we're in a bit of a quandary on what it looks like and how to proceed with teacher negotiations.
Yeah, I think probably the most difficult part right now is the ESSER 3. The way they're talking is it could be allocated over 3 years, and so we wouldn't even have the choice to dump it all into next year. And so I'm just trying to make sure that I'm ready so that when we know those answers, we'll know. Are we willing to take our fund balance to operate? Yeah.
And we have 3 million, is that right, in our fund balance?
The audit last year, we were about 4.5 million, but projected to go down 1 million this year.
Yeah.
And let's see, our election date is May 16th?
18th.
Okay. And deadlines in terms of negotiations and budgeting issues?
So, by statute, we have to issue contracts to teachers before July 1st. Our goal is to conclude negotiations before teachers leave, so they have their contract and they know what their, yeah.
Ideally, negotiations are done by the end of May.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yep.
Ish.
Yep.
Budget.
So the budget hearing, we have a action item, is that right, Mary? Tonight to push the June meeting back to give us a little bit more window on the budget hearing.
Okay.
Definitely not fun. Nothing to talk about. I mean, you know, all of the administrators in here have students in our district, and I have students in our district, and, you know, it's frustrating because this isn't just about sticking it to the district and making them tamp down things. The things that are going to be tamped down are impacting our kids.
Yeah.
And that's the frustrating piece of it. Is
Yeah.
that any way, shape, or form that this doesn't pass, then
Yeah.
the impacts are brutal to
Yeah.
the kids.
Yeah, and some of I didn't really go into this, but some of my frustration is in talking with patrons who voted no. You know, they had some had a specific, well, I can't believe you spent this money on that. That's a waste. And when I said, well, the reality is there's a line item from the state that says we have to spend the money in this category. I couldn't use it to do what you thought I should do. I had to use it for this event or this, not that thing specifically, but for teacher professional learning or for whatever it is. And there's just that lack of understanding. So sometimes people perceive something as being not necessary and perceive a higher need and not understand that, again, our budget is very much controlled at the state level, and we have very little discretion in a lot of areas on what we can spend and can't spend.
It's all about local control.
It is all about local control.
Local control.
Unless it's local control as long as you do it the way we think you should do it.
Exactly. It gets them out of having to be responsible for something, they're happy for local control, but
Yeah.
as soon as
Yeah.
they actually turn over to some discretion, it happens very, very infrequently.
Yeah.
Well, the past two reports are quite depressing, so thanks.
Well, the good news is people want to move here. When we
Yeah.
build it and people want to come, it's a great place to live and it draws it, but growth certainly brings challenges.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the update, even though it's not fun, I appreciate that. Thanks for the work that you guys are doing. And that goes for Jason and Heath and Guy and all of our administrators as well, so just appreciate it.
If I could
Yeah, go
just
ahead.
say one last thing on that, I guess, I mean, it just seems to me, if I'm in your shoes, I prepare the budget on the assumption that nothing passes. I mean, I don't mean to be pessimistic about that, but I just don't know.
Yeah. So, yeah, I would say guys doing due diligence on worst case scenario, and really it's trying to find out how much of the ESSER 3 can we plan on and what can we use that for. And once we have that answered, then we know what we have to cut. But until we know that,
Yeah.
so I mean, if we really want to say we want to prepare a budget that says no ESSER 3 dollars and no supplemental, yeah. I mean, then we are talking all those things I just listed. It's going to take a combination of all those to get there.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah. And on the ESSER 3, we would hope that before the legislature leaves town,
That they would give us
make that
spending
decision.
authority. Yep. Yeah, that's really the only role that the legislature has in any of that. Well, there's really two. The legal role is giving us spending authority. The other thing that they can do, and which they have done, is reduce state funding to schools and then expect us to use the federal dollars to backfill. And there hasn't been, like I said, there hasn't been any discussion that I'm aware of about that happening next year like it did this year, but that's still another factor we have to consider.
Is there going to be any, I mean, I saw something today on Facebook put out by the district about appreciation for our janitors and, you know, how that supplemental money is going for the janitors. Is there going to be an effort to let our patrons know the ramifications of if this doesn't pass, here's what's going? Even if we get the ESSER dollars and we know we're getting certain ones of those and we can spend them, but we know what are the ramifications of that levy failing, which things are going to be on the docket. Is that going to
So-
be advertised prior to May 18th?
Well, so again, I mean, that's still the big unknown, right? That's why I prepared this report for the board, is so that the board is aware, and it's a public document now that we can share, to say, here's really all the things we have to look at. And again, I guess if we really want to go doomsday and we want to prepare that worst case scenario budget, we could do that. My concern, honestly, is, and patrons already told me this, you're threatening us and you're not going to carry through with the threat. And it's not intended to do that. It's really trying to paint the picture of what this looks like with a $10 million shortfall to our budget. The hard thing for me is we paint that picture and then we can use ESSER 3 and we don't have to do that. I feel like I've lost credibility and trust with people because we said this is what we would have to do and now we didn't have to do it. So it's such a hard line, I think, that we're walking, because I want to be transparent. We want people to know the reality of the situation. I don't want to appear like we're misleading.
Yeah, but can't you just build, in other words, if no supplemental, no plant facilities, no ESSER,
Yeah,
here's where we are.
Yeah.
ESSER is probably the next thing I would build in.
yeah,
if I were
and then
kinda-
build it back.
Right, and then just build it back and say, if we've got ESSER, you know, the next $1 million or whatever allows us to
Yeah.
do this. And I know that's a lot of work, but
No, we started a rough draft of that to say, what does it take to get to $10 million? And we've started to build that.
It really lights a fire under the patrons if they understand what the cuts are going to be and where they're going to be. And maybe would light a fire on the complacency that we're seeing with people not getting out
Yeah.
to vote. You know, it might, get people out
Yeah.
to vote if they were unaware of
Okay.
what's going on.
So in the next work session then, which is that next week, Mary? But I've got a rough outline already in a spreadsheet, so I can go through that with Guy and we can give that to the board next week. And just, I think it's a valid point to say, without ESSER, here's what we would have to do. And then potentially, once we know how much of ESSER's coming, we can start talking about what we could potentially build back in. But right now, it's really, for me, I just have a hard time trusting that we're going to have the dollars we're going to need to make up the deficit. So, okay, so we'll have that ready for the board on Wednesday.
because I think it's just as misleading
Right.
to not to talk about it.
Yeah.
Right? And I know, again,
Yeah.
preaching to the choir, but there is a element of transparency on either side of that.
Right.
And obviously, we have to walk the fine line of trying not to use scare tactics that are inappropriate, but also being real.
It's reality.
Right.
Yeah, it's reality.
Budgets aren't just
Right.
fairy dust.
Yeah.
I mean, it's real stuff.
Yeah. And I think to that point, we need to look at what does that $10 million cut look like? We do have $3.5 million likely in our fund balance. If want to get that wiped out, then we could. I'll just say we don't want to wipe it out. It's been interesting to be in conversations with superintendents across the state, and the way these federal dollars work is they work on a reimbursement basis. So you have to have the cash flow to spend on what you need it, and then wait for the reimbursement to come back. Districts that don't have that cash flow are just stuck because they can't spend the money up front and then get the reimbursement. It's been a really, I've been grateful. Yeah, it's been a wake up call for me because I just assumed we have a fund balance, everybody has a fund balance, and that's not the case. It's really been fiscal conservatism in our district that has led us to have that fund balance that keeps things operating. So.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I appreciate you guys looking at all of that. It's a nightmare. So, thanks. All right, Scott, policies for initial consideration.
Yep. For the second time, I'm going to give you a Title IX policy for initial consideration. So we first gave the board a draft of a policy from that is actually the model policy from ISBA. We had the opportunity to try to work through that policy through a couple of actual complaints and found some concerns with it. And so we worked with a national consultant who she's it's a consortium of attorneys who deal with Title IX issues exclusively, both at the collegiate level and at the K-12 level. They helped us draft a new policy. Feels much better, much cleaner, much more direct on how to actually respond to things, and didn't have any of those areas of concern. So I would have loved to give it to you for 30-day. I still feel like I need to have one more meeting with them just to make sure we've got everything crossed. I have gone through it with Doug Nelson. He participated in our initial conversation with that group, and then I reviewed some questions specific to Idaho law implementing it. So I feel good about it. I just want to make sure everything's clear before we put it out to the public. So I think it's great for the board to have for 30-day review, but just not ready yet to submit to the public until I'm confident we've got everything squared away with it.
Yay for the lawyers.
Yes.
So then the proposed policies for 30-day review.
Yes.
Yep. Thanks, Chairman Landers and members of the board. So, yeah, we have 2 proposed policies. I feel like I need to do some type of activity. We could hug maybe, jump around, I don't know, after that. But There's two proposed policies. First one is a 30-day review, and this one is our 3600 student records. And this one's been revised a little bit. It's two really small changes actually, all the way down on page 7 and page 8. The first one is under directory information release. Under letter K, we just added student photographs to that under the directory information. And then there's also under student record challenges, under letter B, there was references to expulsions, and we changed that to records of expulsion instead of references to expulsion. And really a part of it is, if you look in the forms and the exhibit, the student directory information opt-out form, and we're going to make this more of a laserfish form, and it will be under, I think we're putting it in our registration packets. So when parents go in and are going through all of that, then that's a part of that as well. Are there any questions with that? Chad, you want me to start over?
I'm going to make the motion.
You had a board packet, dude.
Is it all right if I move on that?
You feel free.
I move that we put out the proposed policies 3600 et al. Out for 30-day review.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Calder, seconded by Mr. Jenkins. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Oh, and can we please be done with this one? Seriously.
This is why Chad hurried back. I know it.
I know.
And this one is a proposed policy for final adoption. If approved, it would go into our policy manual, be placed on the district's webpage. PTO presidents, schools would be notified that this was approved for final adoption, and it's the bed bug policy. Any questions?
No.
We're good. Do we have a motion for,
I so
final
move.
adoption? Moved by Mr. Calder, seconded by Mr. Dance. Any discussion? Seeing a shake of heads, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Okay, Dr. Wilson, and back to you, our calendar.
So we had this in the previous meeting, and then I asked to table it or postpone it so Mary doesn't correct me on my incorrect use of parliamentary procedure language. But as we've talked about it, the reason was that we postponed it was in case we did need to implement furlough days. The reality is we're not going to know that until our June meeting, if that is something. So my preference would be that we go ahead and approve this calendar, and then if we have to make drastic changes because of potential furlough days, then we do that. So with that, I'd just as a reminder to the board, this does include our Monday collaboration days next year, a strong level of support for that. I had an interesting conversation, just as a side note today, with Heather Gerard from the flight program. I was just dropping some things off to them, and I dropped off some donuts for the kiddos there, and she just expressed appreciation herself. Just one example, just kind of supporting what our teachers said in the survey as well, but she just couldn't express enough gratitude for that collaboration time that she and Robin have to work with community partners to get things organized for their kids. And then I think the most interesting thing she told me was not only did it benefit her personally, but she felt like the kids were much more engaged on the 4 days that they're there, and were actually, their learning outcomes were higher than when we were stretching that over 5 days. And so I haven't asked that question to other teachers. I just thought that was a really interesting observation from Heather. So again, parents were very supportive of this. Teachers are very supportive of it. Not everybody is. I mean, we certainly have heard from some that have concerns with it, and I do think there's some things we need to do to tighten up on our expectations for the Monday intervention time. But overall, really solid support to keep this schedule for next year.
So Scott, if we continue to get a few emails students, and that when they go to get help from their teachers on a Monday, the teachers are not available. So I continue to hear that, and some support to just go back to the 5-day
Yeah.
program. So I guess when you talk about tightening things up,
Yeah.
what are we talking about?
So I would just say, I think by and large, I would say almost all the time teachers are there. There are, of course, going to be times when teachers aren't, and we haven't made it so that teachers can't take a personal day or a sick day on this. I'll take responsibility. For our level, we did do a math professional development that was a full day professional development on this previous Monday and the Monday before. We had conversations, said we won't do a full day again. We'll protect that intervention time for kids, and we'll just schedule that professional development in the afternoon if we need to do that. So we're kind of learning along the lines as well. So that took out our math teachers. Math is still the #1 thing that kids are going to school to get help with, like they have probably for 50 years or longer. And so we have to be mindful of that and make sure we're protecting that intervention time. So I think there's things we need to learn, and that we can do better with it. But I would still say, I'm not saying there aren't valid concerns. I do think there are, and we need to be responsive to those. But overall, people were very supportive of this and felt that it was beneficial. And I can go back to the survey on that, Jason.
Well, and some feedback that we received from our teachers, even with having those trainings on that Monday, was that they were, I don't want to use the word annoyed, but they were disappointed that they weren't there for those students on Monday, even on those 2 PD days that we had for those math teachers. That we sent out a survey that just said, how was the training, just different things, and the feedback that we got a number of times was I feel like my time spent better with my students on those Mondays at that intervention time. So
There was a couple emails this week, and it kind of reiterated what some parents in the past have said as well, that the working parents, they're not home to monitor those kids, and a lot of their kids are just gaming, they're not actually working. I do think if you're going to tighten it up and do it differently, I know you've mentioned it, Scott, they actually just need to be there on that Monday or something?
Well,
I think
I think part of it is we need to articulate more clearly the expectations on that Monday. So I would say, I think there's going to be a two-way street. So one is if students don't need that intervention and support. So if you think about PLCs, that we spend almost all of our time for the last 10 years talking about what should students learn and how will we know if they've learned it. That's the first 2 questions. And then we've done some work on the 3rd question, which is how do we respond if they haven't learned it. We never ever get to the 4th question of if the kids already know it, then what, right? And it's just we spend so much time in that first half, and it's been such a struggle to get to those other 2 questions. And for me, that's a perfect thing for these Mondays, and that is if kids need the intervention and support, we absolutely want them in the school getting that extra help from their teachers. If kids don't, then I really think it's going to be okay for them to have a pass on that Monday. This year we didn't really talk about it this way, and so I do think this idea of we need your kids to be engaged in 4 hours of online learning no matter what, and then the kids weren't. I understand parents' disappointment with that. I think we need to really articulate if kids need the help, they need to be at school. And maybe it's they need to be at school unless they don't need the help, and I think that's part of the change in how we describe it. But if they don't need the help, what we talked about is we really want to provide meaningful extended learning that it's really up to the kids. If you want to increase your learning, here's your opportunity, but it's not going to be that old mindset that to get your grade you have to do it. And that extended learning should never be grade dependent.
No, and I think the second way that you worded that was good.
Right.
I think.
Yep, and that's a conversation we had with principals is we need to communicate that differently, that kids really should be at school, but then teachers will have the latitude to say, nope, you're good, you've learned what you needed to learn, you've shown that you've learned it, you can have that Monday off for what you want. Or if you want to engage in extended learning, here's your opportunity. And one thing we've just briefly talked about, to me, one of the best things we can do is SAT and ACT prep as that extended learning. Like, here's your chance to go on, whether it's Khan Academy or other resources, and learn what you can do to be ready for your SAT and SATs.
I just was reading through those emails this week, and I've heard it from quite a few people, but I recognize that our surveys are very much leaning in the other direction, but I just want to make sure that those Mondays are going to be different.
Yeah.
Because the kids that are having a waste of a day because their parents are working and they're gaming and the parents aren't there to monitor it, they're just not getting educated on those days until the parents get home and want to throttle all of their children, and that's not good either. So, I mean, I don't know.
And I guess I just say the first thing those parents should be doing is sending their kids on a bus to go to school and get the help from the teachers, and then I mean, they'd at least have 4 hours of
half a day.
Yep, and then half a day might not be that meaningful.
Can there be some expectation that the teacher communicates to the parent those kids that don't need to be there?
Yeah.
Maybe, kind of flip that.
Yeah.
Kind of default, I guess.
Yep.
And that way the parent would know.
Yeah.
My child's not expected or needed to be there.
Yeah. And that's one thing we talked about is we probably need to shift our expectations for attendance on those days and say, we need you to be here. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Because I'm in favor if we do something like that. I just feel like it needs to be different than what it has been.
Yeah.
And I think some of it too is the schedule that we had before had a Wednesday early release.
Yes.
Right? And so that was still part of what we were doing. And so, I mean, then it shifts to if you're a high school kid or a middle school kid, you're getting somewhat similar. I mean, it's probably a few hours less.
Yep.
And if you're an elementary kid where it's not every time, it's going to be, so we still have to have collaboration time. So where does that go?
Yes.
Okay. Other questions from the board on the calendar? Go ahead.
Just make
Yeah.
a comment if I could. I certainly got a lot of parental feedback that's very positive, about the schedule. So, I recognize there's a lot of strong feelings on both sides of it, but it's not as if there isn't a lot of support for
Yeah.
this too.
Yeah.
So, mixed bag.
So just one other point of clarification, if I could. So this is the calendar that we publish to the website as like our primary reference for parents, which is great. There are some things though. So what the board's responsibility under state statute is to set the instructional days, so to set the school days. So some things, for example, like registration days, we publish that on this calendar, but if you're okay, I'd rather that's not considered as part of the approval process because we're still working through where those registration days really should fall. Parent-teacher conferences are another example that we will have parent-teacher conferences, but we really need the flexibility to be able to move those where we need to because they're not tied to the instructional days, which is really what the board should be approving. Does that make sense? So so I guess if we're approving this calendar for school days next year, then that gives us the flexibility to deal with those things that are really not tied to school days. And it's really just parent-teacher conference and registration, I think, are the two that are on there.
Alright, so we need to entertain a motion in regards to the calendar.
I move that we approve the proposed 2021-22 calendar as it's been presented.
Do you like second?
Second.
My microphone keeps turning off, so sorry, Bill and Sam. It's been motioned by Mr. Calder, seconded by Mr. Dance. Is there any discussion on the calendar? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries.
Thank you.
Dr. Wilson, next up.
Yep, so two more items, these ones coming underneath negotiations. And so the first one has to do with an amendment to our adopted and negotiated salary schedule for this year. So going back to kind of the roller coaster ride that state funding has been this year, last spring at this time, the state communicated to us that we would be facing a 5% holdback this year, and that one of the ways, or some of the ways that would be held back would be through freezing teachers' movement on the career ladder and not increasing any of the amounts on the career ladder, freezing the increases for administrator pay and for classified pay. So that was the information we had. Our association was fantastic in understanding that that was our financial reality, and we negotiated that they would not move on the career ladder. One of the points, and I don't have this on here, but in our master agreement says that our teachers will be placed according to the state statute on where they're placed on the state career ladder. So that's not originally where we started with our career ladder. We had a totally different way that we placed people that first year, and it created nothing but headaches for about 3 to 5 years after that. There were good, valid reasons why we did ours differently, but the cost of it was just, it was just so hard to figure out how we were placing people because we were using something that was 3 to 5 years old. So we eventually just said we just need to place people where the state has them placed. So with that, the reason why that matters is when the legislature came back and they said we're not going to freeze teachers on the career ladder, they are going to move it. Instead, we're going to hold 5% back from your operational funds, which is what's put us upside down with that ESSER funding. Now we had a bit of a dilemma because we negotiated with teachers that we weren't that they weren't going to move, but our master agreement says we're going to place you where the state has you placed. So in the end, the state appears to have moved our teachers on the career ladder, and so what that means is we have teachers teachers in their second year. So if you look here. That's probably one more thing we need to update now that I'm looking at that. I didn't have her sign off on that. So this is what we negotiated last spring. So you can see teachers who were in R1 stayed in R1, teachers who were in R2 stayed in R2 and R3. Now that the state's moved them, teachers who were in R1 last year would actually move to R2. Teachers who were in R2 would move to R3. Teachers who were in R3 would move to P1. So that's basically the situation that we have from the state, just so you're aware. And so because that statement is already in our master agreement, we did not have to reopen negotiations this year to do that. We're just simply following what's already there. The downside is the teachers down here that are funded, that we pay above the state funding, there's no additional funding for them. And so basically they're remaining frozen if they're in our P5 plus rungs or grandfathered rungs. With me so far? Okay. You're right. Yep. Because this is the schedule we negotiated last year, and again, the state moved people above those blue rungs, but nobody here moved because they're already at the top end of the state career ladder. Does that make sense? They're already at P5, which is where the state career ladder tops out, so there's no movement from them from the state. They stayed at P5. So all that was well and good. The one thing that threw a bit of a hiccup into that is the state created this advanced professional rung that teachers could move into. So that was not in place prior to last year. It was put into statute last year, and then again we were told teachers are frozen, so nobody's going to move to that, so we didn't bother putting it into our salary schedule. But then the state moved them. So now we have a number of teachers that the state has placed in Advanced Professional 1. It's not an easy feat to get to Advanced Professional 1. It's a long list of requirements you have to meet to be there. So you have to have been teaching for at least 8 years. You have to have held a professional endorsement for 5 years. You have to have 75% of your students meet their student achievement targets. You have to have an overall rating of proficient or effective, in our case, on your evaluation, and you have to be marked as highly effective in at least one of 2 domains. You can't have any single component that's marked as less than effective. I mean, there's a lot of hoops to go through. Nonetheless, it appears like a good number of our teachers, we're still working through the list with the state, but it's somewhere between 150 and maybe 220 of our teachers that are going to qualify for that advanced professional rung. So as a result of that, again, in the master agreement we state we're going to place teachers where the state places you. We did not have a placement for advanced professional. So with the association, we agreed to modify our schedule and build that advanced professional rung in there so those teachers had somewhere to land. Some of the teachers that earn the advanced professional are actually down in these blue rungs, but there were a number that were up in the P2 to P5 rungs. And if you notice, if you're in P2 and you're going to AP1, that's a pretty significant increase in your salary. But basically, we're simply passing along what the state is funding for those teachers. So with that, we would just need, the association agreed to that. Their negotiator and I signed off on it, but it would take a motion from the board to approve that change to the master agreement.
Moved by Mr. Dance, seconded by Mr. Jenkins. Is there any questions?
Yeah, I'd like to
Yes.
clarify an item. So, if I understood correctly, approving this would allow teachers to get paid what we are funded by the state for, so it wouldn't increase our expense.
It's not increase our expense at all. Right. Yep. So basically,
Taking advantage of the state funding that's allowed.
yep. So the state is giving us additional money specifically for the movement, and that's money that really belongs to the teachers. So, and really all the board's approving is the addition of that advanced professional rung. Everybody underneath that is already going to receive that additional funding. So.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
And then the last item is just with us getting to that time that we do need to start negotiating with teachers for this year. Again, by statute, it's the board that negotiates with the Teachers Association, and so if the board wants to delegate that responsibility, then we would need an action to do so.
And it would be a delegate.
So by statute, the board is the authorized entity to negotiate with the Teachers Association. The board has historically delegated that authority to the superintendent. That's not in board policy though, so therefore it would take an action of the board to delegate that authority to the superintendent.
Do the negotiations.
Oh, I'm opting out of that.
Yeah.
I'm good. All right, so we have a motion on the table to go ahead and designate the superintendent. Either find somebody to negotiate, meaning like an attorney or yourself or.
Yeah, we have a great relationship with the association, and so it'll typically be Guy, Heath, and Jason, and myself that will enter into negotiations and with the BA leadership team.
All right, so it's been moved by Mr. Jenkins, seconded by Mr. Dance. Is there any further questions or discussions with regards to that?
Well, just a comment, again, just a comment to indicate our appreciation for that relationship, because it's not that way in every district. And so I, as a board member, appreciate that.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah,
It's a big deal.
yeah.
Always been that way in our district.
No, I'll just say Margene did a wonderful job of cultivating a very positive and collaborative relationship, and it's continued. And so it's not that there aren't issues. We're still dealing with issues, but we deal with them together. They bring issues to us, we bring issues to them, but we proactively work to resolve those concerns, and it's a great relationship.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. You got the job, Scott. Okay, Guy, for subject to fee hearing.
Yes, so currently we are scheduled to have the fee hearing on June 9th. That would give us 1 week after the levy. We know the results of the levy before we have to have the budget summary posted in the newspaper. And given everything that's happening, I don't know if I can do it in a week. So I'm asking for 2 weeks because we have to have a budget ready and operating by July 1st. And so There is a work session scheduled on June 16th, and I would just ask that that work session be moved to an evening meeting and and also include the budget hearing and budget adoption.
So you want the work session on June 16th to be an evening?
Yes.
June 9th would be the regular meeting still without the budget?
I think that's the question for the board, is whether you want to simply do one meeting on the 16th, or if you would prefer to have two meetings back to back.
Is this a trick question?
I don't want to presume.
I could make that work. So,
I guess I should look at my calendar, but I think that's fine. Yep. Yep.
June 16th, Paul, are you available at night?
Yep, that's good for me.
So I'd probably say that we simply move the June 9th meeting to the 16th and cancel the work session.
Yes.
Yes.
we do.
Second. With enthusiasm and feeling.
Seconded by Mr. Calder. Is there any discussion on moving that? Canceling the other? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, so for upcoming agenda items, we had some of the things I caught earlier in the meeting were the Black Canyon funds.
Yes, so Nick Miller is going to be visiting us on May, it was the day of the May work session. Does that sound right, Guy, the 19th? So I think it would be, if the board's okay waiting until the 19th, I'd love to include Nick in on that discussion. He can kind of walk us through the legal requirements we have to meet, and then we can have a discussion about how we want to proceed with those funds.
And if I could just clarify, so in other words, the other things we could do besides purchase land.
Well, what we would have to do if we want to do something besides purchase land.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And then, and this is not even a big deal, but sometime in June, after everything is in place, just to do a Black Canyon tour sometime there, just towards the end of June. You could put that in our calendar somewhere, or at least so we can pick a date.
Yeah.
And we are needing to know weeks this summer for retreat, when you guys are available. Like, do you guys have weeks that you're out of town this summer?
Yeah, kind of late July is bad for me too.
And early August, I'm out on dead week, 'cause my kids are not in sports,
Oh yeah.
so I'm out
Yeah.
the
Good for
whole
you.
week.
Yes.
So
maybe-
our regular board meeting is the 14th of July. How does that week look to the board? So if we could potentially maybe do a 2-dayer, maybe Tuesday and Wednesday, and incorporate that board meeting as part of it.
Are you thinking the 13th and 14th?
Or 14th and 15th, whichever is preferable to the board.
Do any of those match up with the checkers game? That would be for Johnson?
I'd have to check with Doug on that, so.
We can check.
I'm open
Yeah.
that week.
Pretty good, too.
Are you guys open July 14th, 15th?
Okay, so let's hope Scott is. Okay. Yeah, we could do the 13th. We could,
Well, could we even do, well, I
Is it
don't
like
know.
his anniversary or something?
no, is that,
Bailing him out.
is a conflict on the 13th as well? The 13th and 14th, right? That's what I was thinking.
Could we do the Thursday, Friday, the 15th, 16th?
Works for me.
Yeah,
I could do the 15th, 16th.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, 15th, 16th, and we could move that board meeting. I don't think there's anything magical about Wednesdays. We could move it to the 15th. Are you okay there, Paul? Okay. Yeah,
Yeah. And are we seems like the last year or two we've done kind how we started, 1 or 2 or 3
Yeah,
hours, something like
afternoon.
that.
Yeah,
Get to work for a little bit,
yeah,
something like that.
So we would move the 14th board meeting to the 15th?
yes.
If we are gonna move that board meeting, are we still wanting to start in the afternoon? If we're gonna be leaving there and coming to a board meeting?
Like you said, would we have enough time to do the other things? Is that
I
what
don't even know
you're?
what we're talking about this
Yeah,
year.
yeah.
Nobody's new on the board, everybody's.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're old and crusty and irredeemable.
Yeah, let's work on that, Amy. Let's see. We won't make any decisions yet, but yeah,
Sure,
yep.
pending Scott Lynch. Mary, is it possible
Is
that
there-
we could text
which
the
night?
Pac-Man meeting or something?
Both?
Or
Okay.
just those dates? Okay. I think that was it as far as what I taught during the meeting. Is there anything else from administration or?
Guy, we've had discussions with Harry, but we're moving that into probably maybe part of our retreat discussion.
That's gonna be late,
June.
because if we wanted to have an impact on the levy rate, we've got to probably have it done, yeah, June at the latest, I would think. Defeasance or refinance. It would take an action of the board, but we could designate it as a special meeting. So let's, I think we might target the May work session, and then, yeah, I think along with the other discussion about the bonds. So we'll target that May 19th date. Yep. Nick was going to be here, and then we can see if Eric could be available either Zoom or in person.